Good evening and welcome to another edition of Shots from the Bench. It's only sports talk and all opinions are both fabulous and flawed. I'm Bob Wiltman. We have a special guest and my producer Greg's running around the back, keeping the sanity, taking care of the cameras, and trying to hit on the waitresses. We're here at Gators Dockside in the beautiful Brownwood section of the Villages. Gator Dockside, they have the tastiest sports in the Villages. And we are here every Tuesday from 6 to 7 p.m. So come on in live, join us for some fun, trivia, and an occasional free drink. If you can't come in person, come on out and join us on our website at shotsfromthebench.com. We are, after all, the only sports talk show in the Villages. Now, our guest co-host. I'm going to let these accomplishments testify to his global golf prowess. Two-time All-American selection out of Brigham Young. Lost in a playoff to Hale Irwin at the 1984 Bing Crosby. Came in second in the 83 Sea Pines at Hilton Head. Won the World Cup with Dan Halderson in 1980. And I followed him in the PGA in 1983. And why did I follow him? Because he was the first guy I ever saw that played right-handed and putted left-handed. If you don't know who he is by looking at him, and he's been on a golf commentator on Canadian and American national TV, I'll introduce him now as Jim Nelford. And Jim, I can't thank you so much for being with us, and I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking. First thing I'm going to throw at you, and we have a lot to talk about, but you know you're going to get this question from me. The fiasco that was the USPGA, the USGA ruling at Oakmont with the moving ball. Tell me what you can possibly, how you would have done that differently if you were a WPGA member.
Well, as far as the USGA went, they made the worst mistake they could have made.
Thank you.
By not either deciding it was a penalty or not. Now, in my opinion, there was no penalty. He did not cause that ball to move. They looked at it and they said, well, if he didn't cause it to move, what did? And I said, well, there's a little thing called gravity, guys. You might have watched it all week where balls almost stopped rolling and then decided to start rolling again and roll 40 yards down the fairway. When you get greens like Oakmont has, and they are notoriously the fastest in the nation, and you get them up to 15, you get them 2 feet faster with that kind of slope, they're uncontrollable. And he did not touch the ball. The ball actually rolled backwards. So the USGA, I don't know what they were thinking, but once they made that decision, I said, there's no way out for them. There is no way out. They're going to look stupid before or after, and they ruined a great tournament, I thought.
I'm glad this is a pro saying what all of us, the amateurs, have always thought. I could not, in my wildest dreams, figure out, okay, if you want to assess him a penalty, go in and assess him a penalty. Say, did you make the ball move? No? Well, we think you did. But to say, we're going to get back to you on this, I mean, not only does that goof up Dustin Johnson, well, I ended up not goofing him up, but the guy's trying to chase him because you don't know where you stand.
Well, and I thought the guys that were trying to chase did a pretty good job of saying it didn't matter to us because you really can't think about that. What it really mattered to was the whole broadcast. And because I'm a broadcaster, I understood that and I said, now we're going to talk about this for the next 5 holes. And it's taking away from Dustin Johnson winning his first major and coming and doing it with class and playing great. And the whole story became about the USGA instead of the golf. That was a major, major mistake.
Well, I'm sorry. I hope nobody think we're overdoing this, but you got a pro that can actually who's actually been there, and so you feel the same way as Spieth and everybody else that tweeted in and said, what a ridiculous way to handle it.
Well, and I feel very much like Brandel Chambly when the USGA official came up there and tried to explain to him how Dustin Johnson must have made the ball move. And I watched the guy, and I thought it was a little bit of USGA arrogance of we're making the rules. Well,
what a surprise!
Exactly. I played in 5 opens, and I hated the setups. It brought the game down to who was the luckiest, who got the luckiest bounce, who got the luckiest lie when you're hitting a 6-iron into a green and it bounces 10 feet high and goes over in the rough. They're not fun tournaments to play in. U.S. Opens are not fun at all. And although they keep saying we're trying to identify the best player, there's only one guy happy at the end of the week, and that's the guy with the trophy. Everybody else needs weeks off just to recover.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to let that be the final word on that subject until some other show brings it up. But Jim, I want you to just tell everybody, I mentioned some of your global accomplishments in international golf and domestic golf. Take us back. I know you were Vancouver, British Columbia. You don't think of that as being a golf mecca. Fill us in on how you got started.
Well, I was a normal kid from Burnaby, which is right beside Vancouver, and I played every sport. Played a lot of hockey, a lot of basketball as a kid, a lot of baseball, and hey, when it stopped raining in Vancouver, the golf clubs came out, and I found out that guys were getting their growth in hockey much quicker than I was. I was 5'2" at the end of grade 10, so that hockey was not going to be a sport for me, although my dad was drafted by the Detroit Red Wings, would have played with Gordie Howe.
How about that?
Sid Abel at that time.
You don't get drafted if you're chopped liver. He must have been a heck of a player.
He was a good player, but he had to
he
join.
your size? Your
he had
size?
to join. Well, he's about 5'10", but at that time that was about normal size,
Yeah.
And but he had to join the Air Force, so he didn't get his chance. But he got out there on the golf course, and he invited us to come with him, and anything with a ball and a club or a ball and a glove, I wanted to play. And I played all the sports and loved them all. And but golf, to me, was something that nobody could keep you from being as good as you wanted to be. And so I would practice before school, I would practice after school. I was probably the kid in British Columbia that practiced the most.
Did you have access to a country club, or was it all range?
No, it was,
range
we were members at a club called Pitt Meadows, and it was about 20 miles from where we lived. But
geez.
a block from where I lived was a small park called David Gray Park, and I could hit up to 7 irons down there, and that's where I would go practice wedges and 7 irons and 8 irons and 9 irons. And truly, I was captured by the game. It was really neat for an athlete to be able to control a ball when it's going 200 yards, 230 yards.
It must be nice.
Fascinating.
I never could do it.
Well, at times, you have a little more control than others, but at times it's the toughest game in the world, too.
Well, so, okay, so you go through the logical progression, all the stories, hard work, hit a lot of balls, make yourself as good as you want to be, but tell me how you ended up at Brigham Young.
Well, I had gone over to Hawaii my final year in high school with a buddy and talked to the golf coach there, George Seachy, and we played 9 holes, and he offered me a scholarship. It was a half ride.
Guess he was impressed.
And I thought, Hawaii, what could be more golf? Hawaii can't get better than this. But something told me that, that might not be the place for me. I don't know what, because Hawaii is paradise, basically. Yeah. But I waited it out, and eventually I got in touch with Ben Doyle, who was the teaching pro at Carmel Valley. And he was the teacher that brought up Bobby Clampett. Bobby Clampett ended up going to BYU behind me, and Ben recommended me to Carl Tucker, and Carl Tucker was the head coach at Brigham Young, where Johnny Miller had just gone through. So I didn't know anything about Brigham Young. The only thing I knew about Mormons was that movie Paint Your Wagon, with Clint Eastwood in it and everything. Are they really going to be like that? Johnny Miller went there, so maybe I should go there.
My next question was, are you a Mormon? I guess I found out the answer to that one.
No, well, they tried to dunk me, but I think I was crossing my fingers, so it didn't take. But I got in the culture, and a lot of very good people there, and I got married there and have kids that are there, so Utah is a beautiful place.
Well, that's fantastic. So, okay, so you come out of Brigham Young, 2-time All-American, so you've got to be thinking right about now, maybe I'm ready to give the tour a try, or at least I think I'm good enough to take a crack at it.
Oh, that was always my dream. I was always where I was going, and the power of dreams is huge. And I'd played in the Canadian Open a couple times as the Canadian amateur champion, and made a couple cuts, and so I knew that when my game was on, I could compete out there. And So I went to Q School after my last year. I'd won the Canadian Amateur 2 times, finished second a third time, won the Western Amateur, which is a big tournament. And so I went to the Q School and made it my first time, and there I was living my dream the first time in '78. Playing against Nicholas and all the guys that I had pictures on my bedroom wall
Now, what
of
was
all these guys.
What was your first pro tournament?
Well, that was the Canadian Open when
Canadian-
I was
okay.
when I was an amateur.
Okay, but when you finally decided to take the plunge, as it were.
Well, it was interesting. IMG, which is Mark McCormack, he was managing Nicholas and
Sure.
Player and Palmer, and they recruited me. And they said, well, we're going to send you down to Columbia to play a tournament. You get a little appearance fee. And so I get down there, and my clubs show up. Lynx had wanted to sign me, so they had new clubs for me and everything. My clothes didn't show up. So I don't have any golf shoes, and I've got these clubs I haven't played with. I go to the first tee for a practice round, and Seve Ballesteros walks up, and he says, are you playing by yourself? Do you mind if I join you? And I said, I
not?
kind of said, I'd rather you wouldn't. But we played.
I like that.
But we played, and he had just had that wonderful tournament where he almost won the British Open, where Johnny Miller won it.
Yeah.
And so I had been paying attention to how well he was playing, and it was fascinating, to watch him compare my game to his, and okay, he hits it maybe 5 yards farther, and he's a little wild, but wow, this guy's got some magic around the short game. He has got absolute magic around the greens. And I just actually saw Seve, the movie, last week, and it's
Really?
up in Spanish Springs, and they did a great job.
I'm glad to see
his
it.
whole passionate time as a teenager growing up and being a caddy and turning into a fantastic ball striker and have a great short game. And it really showed, what it took for a guy to break through with the belief system and everything. It was a fantastic movie.
Well, I'll tell you what. I know we're done with the first quarter of our show, but this is fascinating. We're going to be back with Jim Nelford, and we got a lot more professional golf, some tips, some suggestions, and some attitudes that we want to talk about. We'll be back with Jim right after this.
Good job.
Thank you. That's all right. We are back with the second hole, since it's a golf show, of Shots from the Bench here at beautiful Gators Dockside in the beautiful Brownwood section of the Villages. Gators Dockside, they have the tastiest sport in town. We're here with special guest Jim Nelford. Jim has been a professional golfer of significant accomplishment, and picking up where you left off, you were talking a little bit about Seve, and I want you to get back to Seve.
Yeah, the movie I saw, it really reminded me a lot of how I felt as a kid, almost how every kid who makes it to the tour feels. There's a passion, there's a burning desire to play well, to be so fascinated by a great shot that you'll do anything to hit another one. And Seve had that. It was really interesting to watch how much he liked to help other players. And there, if you went and you asked Seve for tips, he would spend any amount of time with you that you wanted. And that wasn't well known out on tour, but he just loved playing well. He really loved beating the Americans in the Ryder Cup. That was his big deal, because he and Bernhard Langer and Nick Faldo, when they came over, they really made the Ryder Cup something special again, because the U.S. was thumping Great Britain for so long.
Yeah, well, yeah, they just didn't have enough quantity of good golfers, I think Britain did.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, they had a few, but
When they added Europe and those guys came along, they became quite the force. And they won a lot of Masters between them. And Seve, actually, the last tournament that Seve played in his career, the last round was with Lee Trevino and myself in Birmingham.
Oh, geez.
That was one of the tournaments that I'd qualified for, and it was Seve's first and only senior tour event. And it was really interesting. He wanted to play well. He was being touted, okay, he's going to get out there and play on the tour, and he would have been a huge draw.
You think?
You
Yeah.
want to watch him.
Yeah, everybody.
And, I'd played okay my first round and bad the second round, and so we were first group off. Trevino did not want to be there. He was whining and moaning the whole round, and Seve was grinding away, and I'm grinding away. Seve, it looked like he was trying to play the U.S. Open. He was grinding so hard, and we started making some birdies, started playing good. And Trevino was kind of on the sidelines, and he's just taking about 2 seconds. He's hitting as fast as Mo Norman and just driving it right down the middle. And he's watching us grind away, and he starts making a few putts, and pretty soon, we're all playing great. And but it was quite funny. Seve, and I was happy for him on the last hole, tough hole, par 4, around a lake in a bunker. Hit a great drive and hit a 6-iron in about 40 feet and made it in front of a great big crowd.
Oh, cool.
And to know that, that was his last competitive stroke, it kind of put, the icing on a wonderful career of how passionate he was, how much he loved the game. Seeing that movie really puts it into perspective of where he came from and some of the obstacles he had to get over. And that he was so beloved by so many of the players. I mean, the last Ryder Cup where the Europeans won, Olazabal was, he made an awful lot of references to Seve, and they had Seve on the shirts and everything. It was magical. It was kind of like his life. He was magical.
Well, that's, and and speaking of overcoming some obstacles, I want to talk to Jim about that. But first, I want to get back on the track of your career, and then we'll talk about some of the things that you've encountered. But when did it hit you that, hey, I'm going to be all right out here? When did that must have all of a sudden it must have something happened that you must have said, I can handle this. That's a lot of pressure, but I can handle it.
Well, I guess it's going to have to come down to the last round of qualifying school. And we were giving out 30 cards, and we're playing at Pinehurst number 4.
Oh, boy.
So I started out, and this is kind of a funny story. I didn't have a caddy when I went there. And so I'm looking for a caddy, and there are a number of guys out front, and a guy says, you got a caddy? And I said, no, I don't. And I said, have you ever caddied before? He says, oh, yeah, man, I caddied before. And I said, well, who'd you caddy for? He says, well, Hal Ivan. I said, who? Hal Ivan. And that was Hale Irwin. He was Hale Irwin's caddy, which we had something to do with each other a little bit later. But his nickname was Killer, and his name is Killer Foy. And I didn't know that Killer is legally blind. And so in the last round on the first green, I've hit it in the trees. I've now got a 30-footer for par. And so I bring Killer in because I'm choking. And I'm on 30th spot, so I can't afford to have a bad round. Killer gives me a read, and it looks like it's 1.5 feet off. And I said, are you sure, Killer? And he says, yeah, I'm sure. And I hit it, and I miss it 3 feet to the right and miss that. I start out with double. Oh, this is bad. We go to the next hole, par 3, and I knock it down there about 15 feet, run it 3 feet by. Killer, what do you think? I think it's going right. Well, the putt went left. And that was the last putt he ever read for me. And I found out later he's legally blind.
That's never good. For all you future caddies out there, make sure you can see what you're looking at. There's nothing worse than guessing. You don't want to be guessing. You won't last long on the tour.
But to finish that story,
Yeah.
I ended up making 5 birdies in the next 6 holes and cruised in and finished 17th. And I said, okay, you can handle that heat. You can handle what they're going to give you out on tour. That's what I was thinking anyways. Theoretically, that's the way it should go, Bob, but it doesn't always go that way. And, it's a learning curve out there. You really learn a lot.
Well, what did you find out that obviously you're full of pea and vinegar and you're ready to go out on the tour. What did you learn that maybe you were going to be lacking a little bit watching some of the other guys play? Is there something you said, I'm not there yet, I got to get there?
It was really confidence. I'd won enough tournaments, I'd played good. When I played with enough guys, I said, when I'm on, I'm matching up.
Yeah.
I'd play with Johnny Miller in some practice rounds, the Canadian Open, and at that time, Johnny was hitting it the best he'd ever hit it in his career. I have never seen a guy hit the ball straighter than Johnny Miller.
Wow.
We'd hit a cut, Johnny, the ball would cut 1 foot. Okay, hit a draw, ball would curve 1 foot. He hit it better than anybody hit it for 2 years straight. It was a joke how good he was.
And I never thought he was known as being a great ball striker. Shows you, what I know, really.
Oh, he was a horrible putter, a horrible putter. I mean, he would actually, when he won the British Open, he couldn't even watch the putter. He couldn't, he'd look down at a spot that he drew on the grip of his putter, and he would watch that spot because he was yipping it so bad. So Johnny has figured out how to win tournaments even when he's yipping
Even
it.
when he's yipping.
Yeah.
And you've arrived. But I'll tell you what, okay, so you get to the point where, well, tell me about the World Cup. I mean, that's got to be some kind of you got to feel some kind of proud feelings about the World Cup.
That was a wonderful tournament. It was being held in Bogota, Colombia.
Wow.
And Dan Halderson, who had won on tour, my Canadian partner, was playing very well. We were playing, and Bogota is at probably 4,000, 4,500 feet, so the ball goes a long ways.
Yeah.
And we got paired with Sandy Lyle and his partner 3 out of the 4 rounds. And this is when Sandy was playing his best.
Yeah, he was good.
And I remember a par 4 we had, and they had huge eucalyptus trees. And this hole was about 310 yards. Dogleg left, and if you hit driver, you could hit it through the fairway. You wouldn't get it to the green. Sandy took a 5-wood and launched it over these eucalyptus trees. It had to be 200 feet high, and got it on the green. And I just went, holy. Halderson and I looked at each other and went, good thing his partner's not that good. And we ended up winning that, but which was a fantastic win. When you've got that many countries, actually Johnny Miller and Mike Reed were paired for the U.S. Seve didn't play in that one. I thought he was going to play. He didn't play in that, but there was a lot of great players. But, it's handling yourself and your emotions coming down the stretch. And actually, I'd had a deja vu. Standing on the 18th tee, we were leading. And in my dream, we were leading. And I took out driver, and it's a little dog leg right, but there's a creek all along the left. And in my dream, I snap hooked it into that creek. So when I got to that tee, that driver had no chance of coming out of the bag. I hit forward off the tee, up the right side, and scraped something onto the green, and I think we won by 5. But that was my first really serious deja vu that I paid attention to.
I'll tell you, I love it. We're going to be back with the second half of Shots from the Bench and hear a lot more about some of the personal things Jim's had to overcome and some of the rather high-profile students he's taught. So we'll be back to talk to him about both those issues. We'll be back with Shots from the Bench right after this. I love it. Those are great stories. We're back with the second half of Shots from the Bench. I'm here with my special guest, Jim Nelford. And Jim, off camera, you were sharing a story with me about playing in Bogota. I'd like you to share with our listeners or our viewers exactly what transpired down there.
Well, the normal touristas transpired down there, but they also had a national strike, labor strike on when we were there. And so they told us, don't go out after 8 o'clock at night out of the hotel. And, well, why? And we go to restaurants and say, well, you might be shot. So we ate in the hotel every night.
That's going to hurt your finish.
Yeah, that could put a little cramp in your style. And so we decided to stay in, and they had a national strike, as I was saying, and they put nails on the road on Sunday morning. So we didn't know if we could get to the golf course because normally they took us out in buses, and they were flattening the bus tires. So the members decided that they would drive all the players out to the course. And so we had Porsches and BMWs and Mercedes with these broomsticks tied to the front bumpers. And I said, we are definitely going to win this under duress if we win this one, Dan.
This is an international competition, and you're driving Porsches with brooms on them. I love it. And one of the things we talked about before we get back to your career, I wanted to talk a little bit about this fiasco that's turning into the Rio Olympics, and especially as it pertains to the golfers who are going to be participating for a gold medal. all of the global international competitions, I said I just can't fathom why somebody would think it's that big a deal to go and play in the Olympics. Well, I guess a gold medal, but
Well,
you?
NBC made a big contract with
Yeah.
with the Olympics, and they paid a lot of money, and they'd like to get stars there. But I have to agree with Rory McIlroy. He says we basically play in 4 Olympics a year, and those are the majors, and they're very important. He said nobody's going to remember if I win a gold medal, but they do remember if I win the Masters of the U.S. Open. And, they have a little thing called the Zika virus down there, and I think it's probably a pretty good excuse for guys not to go down. But they're also having trouble politically with raising enough money to make sure that the players are safer. And that comes in a very difficult time for a lot of guys to play
Well, that's what
with
I mean.
all
Yeah,
the
just
majors
the time
coming
of the
up.
year, it doesn't seem to make sense to me.
No, and I think the Olympics are really made for amateur athletes, the swimming and the track and field, that is their big deal every 4 years. And for the tour, they just have so many huge events. Now, they said, it's going to grow the game, but in any of those countries where they're not, playing a lot of golf, they're not going to play more golf because of the Olympics. They're not going to get in the Olympics anyways.
Yeah.
So although some of those sports get funded because it's an Olympic sport, golf doesn't produce great players because they want to go to the Olympics.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I've always felt the same way, but a lot of people don't know where they stand on that. But to me, it's not going to be like, ooh, watch, you're going to get to see Rory McIlroy play Bubba Watson. You're going to get to see him play every weekend. I mean, so that would be the thrill of watching the Olympics to me.
Yeah, you're getting a better field at the World Series of Golf.
Sure, absolutely.
You're getting a better field at the U.S. Open, at the PGA,
Bridgestone,
the
sure.
British Open.
That's right.
So it's not as if it's a viewer's the best thing they could watch. And truthfully, when the guys play for their country in a World Cup or in a Ryder Cup, that's when they do their flag waving. So.
Well, that's that's enough of the Olympics. But I was just interested to get Jim's take on that because luckily I feel exactly the same way. I want to get back to Jim's career because now we're getting to the point where, a runner-up. Obviously, you're playing weekly and doing pretty well, but a runner-up at Sea Pines, that ain't all bad. And a final at Pebble Beach. I think you're making a statement now.
Well, I got playing really good. I learned a pre-shot routine, which is very important to me. I'd worked with a sports psychologist, and we worked on a heart rhythm. And we actually wrote a book about it called The Rhythm. And it really showed me a lot about how to get into the zone, to calm down. And once I learned that, I made 35 cuts in a row on the PGA Tour, which is a long streak.
Wow.
And it wasn't even close to missing it. So my parameters went really close. But it kind of got me into, what's going on with the mind, the heart. And, you hear Faldo talk about it a lot of times when a guy's coming down the stretch. Breathe, man, breathe.
Yeah, he's always talking to him.
Yeah, we get so uptight. And although people think golf moves slowly, when you're in contention, everything's moving so fast, it's a joke. Yeah. And when I learned to control that, I felt like that shaped my swing more than my swing would shape that frame of mind. And knowing that, I just got hitting it better and better and better. And Fuzzy Zeller and I think we had a 4-shot lead at Hilton Head with 4 holes to go against the rest of the field. And I plugged it in 2 bunkers. I ended up making a bogey and double, and he won by 2.
18 get you, or
No, actually 15.
15. Yeah.
We were tied on 15, and he was up first. And he took a 2-iron, and it was a really tough par 5 that it's a 3-shot par 5, really narrow.
Yeah.
And he snap hooked a 2-iron into the palmettos. And I go, well, this could be the first win for Old Nelly. Well, and I hit 3-wood off the tee, and I hit 4-iron down there. Well, he not only found his ball, but he had a swing, and he had a perfect shot. And he laid it up actually closer to the green than I did. And my 3rd shot plugged onto the lip, and it was all a sad story from there.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll share a little bit. So you're in a playoff. with Hale Irwin at Pebble Beach. What's not Pebble Beach? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Pebble Beach at the
Pebble Beach,
Crosby.
Crosby. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And so, did you? Now I can't remember. Did you come back and catch him? Did you fall back to the
No,
back?
actually, he came back. I shot 69 the last round, and so I was leading in the clubhouse. And the only guy that could catch me, O'Meara was in the group right behind me. He had a birdie putt from about 15 feet to tie, and he missed that. And Irwin was the only guy that could catch me. And so I'm being interviewed at that time by Steve Melnick. And I can't see anything, but there's the board, Nelford on top, and Irwin's got to make birdie. Well, he snap hooked the tee shot, and it's in the ocean. And it hit 30 yards out and bounces straight back into the fairway.
I do remember that.
And Steve Melnick says to me, well, Irma's just snapped it in the ocean, well, and it's bounced out. And I said, well, he's still got to make birdie to tie, so I'm still looking okay. And I guess he thought he couldn't do anything wrong because he took 3-wood and laid it up in the gap between that bunker by the seawall and the tree.
Yeah.
And it's only 50 yards from the green, and that was not a good place to lay it up because the greens were really firm that year. The pin was back left, and he one-hopped it, and it hit the pin head high. 'Cause it was going over the green. And it bounces down a foot in front of his amateur partner's ball. So his amateur partner got to stroke it and show him the line and everything,
geez,
and he
see.
makes it.
Oh, God.
Well, so we get tied. Now we got to go into the playoff. And I remember George Knudsen telling me one time, he said, look, don't ever think that the round ends on 18. Always be prepared to play more. So that was good. I remembered that, and we went out on this 15th hole was our first hole. And we both hit decent tee shots out there and both had 9 irons, 8 irons into the green. Both made par. On that next hole, the 16th hole, it's a dogleg right downhill, and there is a bunker off the tee that literally you can throw it in off the tee. And he got up there with the 3-wood, and it's right into the sun, and he fat chunked it, and it was just a pop-up. It went literally 150 yards into this bunker. I'm thinking, oh, well, okay, I got him. Nobody's hit it. I've never seen anybody. I've never seen an amateur hit it in that bunker, let alone a pro. And I hit 4-wood down there, and I had 9 iron in. So I was hitting it quite long at that time. He had 2 iron, and this bunker had an island of grass in it that's normally 1.5 feet high. It had hit in there and rolled into a perfect flat line where he could hit 2 iron out. And he pured this 2 iron, and it hits the front right of the green, pins all the way back left, and I'm watching it, and I'm literally 75 yards ahead of him. And it's rolling towards the pin, and I went, oh my God, don't go in. I mean, give me a chance to make birdie at least to tie. And it went about 10 feet by, and I knocked my 9 iron. I was in between clubs, and I knocked my 9 iron in about 25 feet. I missed it, and he makes it.
Yeah.
And he still hasn't apologized. He still hasn't apologized.
For duffing the second one. I like that. I like that a lot. Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to be back, and here's what I want to talk about in the last quarter. We're going to talk about some of the things that Jim's had to overcome, but I also want to talk about who he's teaching, and there's some fairly big names here. And I also want to ask him about a couple players that have lost their game, and I want to find out exactly what he can tell us about that. So we will be back with the 4th and final hole here on Shots from the Bench with Jim Nelford right after this. We are back with the 4th and final round of Shots from the Bench here at Gators Dockside in the beautiful Brownwood section of the Villages Gators Dockside. We have the tastiest sports in town. Now we are listening to Jim Nelford, former PGA player, expert golf pro commentator, teacher, and he has taken us through his career to where he's actually gotten to the playoffs, playing Hale Irwin, who got a little lucky on him at Pebble Beach. Now, why haven't you heard the name of Jim Nelford from 1985 to, say, 2000? Jim, why don't you tell us what happened? It doesn't have to be long, but it's something that everybody's going to be interested in hearing.
Yeah, it was an unfortunate thing that happened in 1985. I'd been playing all right. It wasn't my best year, certainly wasn't my worst, but I was playing decently, and I'd come off the tour for a week in Scottsdale, Arizona. That's where I was living, and we went out boating, and I was skiing, and I'd fallen. The guy came to pick me up, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and he had the boat pointed right at me. And I said, I want you to get that boat pointed away from me. It's the second time you've come up on me like that. And the next thing I knew, he had it gunned, and it was going straight over top of me.
Oh, boy.
And the skag got me in the leg, and my right arm went right through the prop. And, you know, the lake was 95 degrees. And so it was like a shark attack. And
God.
my right arm flopped up over my shoulder, and I thought, that's the end of my career. That was when I was 30 years old.
How disturbing is that news? Because, like I said, being a sports page junkie, I remember reading about it, and it was, just a little, boating accident. Nelford gets injured, and I thought, and then the more I read about it, I went, you got to be kidding me. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. But okay, so it puts your career on hold, to be sure, and puts it in a different direction. But tell me a little bit about this medical extension thing you had to fight through once you were able to try to get back and play some golf.
Yeah, we had just come up with the all-exempt tour probably 4 years before. So it was the top 125 would keep their card. And that, because we had more and more good players, and top 60 wasn't working. So they made it into top 125 and then another 50 qualifiers. But they didn't have a medical extension policy, and nobody really got hurt bad enough to use one. So after I got hurt that badly, Beeman was going to give me, Dean Beeman,
This
who
is
was
Dean
the
Beeman, the
commissioner.
head of the PGA.
Yeah, he wanted to give me a year full of sponsor exemptions. And I said, no, Dean, that's not good enough. I earned my spot. I was 111th on the tour
Which
and
was
hadn't
plenty
played
high
in the last
enough,
10. Yeah, and so I had earned that, and you'd earn that only by your play. Nobody gives it to you. And so we convinced him that I would get my full year of exemptions. And we also made a medical extension policy with my agent and myself, and helped the PGA Tour write that. So all those guys who get hurt and have time off now owe me a little bit of a check, so you can send it right here to the villages. They're getting treated quite well, actually, by that medical extension policy.
Well, they have a lot to thank you for, but obviously, with your prowess and knowledge of the game, you've got yourself an impressive list of pupils. I'll listen to some of the names and see if any of these ring a bell. Tell us about your pupils, Jim.
Yeah, when I played more like an athlete, and I didn't play conventionally. I used a lot of the principles that we use in other sports, and athletes do, and I was kind of self-taught. So I noticed that Freddie Couples is that way too. And we were doing a skins game in Canada, and Freddie was playing. And I got together with him after the round, and we talked about things, and he really liked what I was saying. So he brought me out to the PGA, and I worked with him there. And he gained 10 yards, he hit it straighter. We did a lot of good work. And from that, Brad Faxon came along and said, if you're teaching Freddie, I want to know what you're teaching. And so I worked with Brad Faxon for a year and a half or so, and then he brought along Billy Andrade, and I helped Billy win a tournament, and it was just stuff that was a little bit ahead of their time. It was different than what they were hearing, and so they played very well right away. But as you know, when you get under pressure, you revert back to old habits, and some of that was happening, and plus Brad Faxon was very unusual.
He never hit the ball straight anyhow, did he?
No, and actually, when he won his first tournament, it was at the BC Open, which is one of the tightest golf courses we have on tour. And he actually tied Fred Funk, and they had a playoff in the 18th hole. And so Brad called me up after the tournament. He said, yeah, I drove it so good, I can't believe it. He said, in the playoff, I hit the fairway 3 times in a row. Fred Funk finally missed the fairway on the last playoff hole, and I won the tournament. And I said, well, that's what we're teaching you, good learning, kid. so that was a nice thing to have happen.
Well, that's great. I think that's fantastic, because Faxon, you're kind of like Crenshaw. I mean, he was noted for being as good a putter as you got, but he was hitting it. I watched him play in one of the, it might have even been the PGA. He's hitting it all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
he had no idea where he was hitting it when I saw him.
Right, and he was, and exactly, that was his game. You've described it. One of the best putters we've ever had on tour.
Sure.
Great wedge player, but couldn't drive it on the earth. So, we got him straightened out and did some great work, and so it's fun to work with guys, at the top level. They'll work at it.
Let me ask, and we talked, I see one of your pupils was Hal Sutton, and Hal Sutton was a very, very dominant player on the tour, but he seemed to have lost his confidence when he made it to the seniors. And I was curious what your take was on that.
And that's a good observation. He lost it a couple times on tour where he really hit the skids. And he went looking for all of the fixes in a mechanical way. And I call it linear, logical, left brain thinking. Positions, trying to get every club in just the exact right position. And we don't play that way. So when I worked with him, we worked on different things. And he had some great success right away. Didn't win the tournament at Phoenix, but I think he shot 62 one of the rounds that we played in. And we went to the Crosby the next week, and we started working on his short game. He has the worst short game on tour, or had the worst short game on tour.
Sorry.
Bad bunker player, couldn't get it out of rough. We've all been there, where you hood those chips and they go screaming 20 feet by. And we worked on that, and he said something that was really interesting. He said, as excited as I was about what you did for my long game, he said, I'm twice as excited what you did for my short game.
All right.
Now, a week later, he came up to me and said, everything you're teaching me is wrong. So I've got to feed my family. And I said, oh my gosh. So no matter sometimes what you can tell someone, if they don't accept it, if they don't understand it, they're going to revert back.
Well,
And to a
I
comfort
can
zone.
relate. Yeah. You think, well, I'm comfortable doing it. I'm going to do it wrong. I'm going to do it my way wrong. That's great. That's just what you need. But I also mentioned a couple players to you, like Verplank and Ian Baker Finch, guys that for some reason looked like their careers were laid out in front of them, and they just took a wrong turn somewhere.
The Baker Finch one is really interesting, isn't it? To win the British Open as a great putter. And, what happens a lot of times on the PGA Tour, especially when a guy wins a major and it's his first, he now gets announced as, you're the British Open champion. And every one of them seemed to go to a teacher, well, now I'm a major winner. I got to be even better. I've got to be even more proper. And so they go to a coach who evidently teaches them out of what they did well into something that's proper, and they lose their games. And that's happened so many times, it's not a fluke.
Gives me the scary.
Yeah, and you can lose it quickly. And when Baker Finch lost it, he lost all of his confidence, and literally he could hit it 100 yards right or 100 yards left. So it was sad to see. He never recovered, really.
Isn't it amazing, too? You see somebody, I'm going to bring out a name of somebody that just disappeared from sight, Steve Stricker. And he went through 5 years where you never saw. He was great, and then he disappeared, and then he became great again. All you can do is tip your hat to him, I guess. I mean,
Yeah, what he found there in the winter in Wisconsin, hitting balls out of a covered driving range out into the snow, I don't know if he'll ever tell anybody, but he got his confidence back. I think he went back to being Steve Stricker. Instead of trying to be proper, trying to be someone else, he went back to how he felt the swing and perceived the swing best. And he got a little help with it, and that's usually from someone you've known in the past and said, you used to do this, you used to do that. That's what we used to do on tour, with our friends. When they were not playing well, you could notice they're doing something a little different and said, you look a little different there. And we helped each other out a lot. Now a lot of these guys, they've got entourages behind them.
Of course, posses.
And sometimes, a lot of times it doesn't work. Like Mike Weir right now, our Canadian, Canadian friend.
Canadian compatriot. Mike Weir, a Masters winner, has been struggling, and I just pull for him every time he's in a tournament. But boy, if he makes a cut, I'm thrilled for him.
Well, so is he. I mean, I think he made one cut in the last 3 years. But it's a long ways to fall, and it's possible. Guys know it out there. And he went to stack and tilt, got injured with one elbow, got injured with another
That's all it
elbow,
takes.
and he has never been back.
Well, I'll tell you what, we're about out of time, but before I go to the big finish, I want, Jim is perfectly interested in having you email him with any questions or any comments you have, and he'd like to get back to you. Jim, make sure I do this right. Your email address is jimnelfordgolf@gmail.com, correct?
That's right.
Jim Nelford, that's Nelford, Jim Nelford Golf. And also, I do a show up at Harbor Hills Country Club Thursday night. You can come by in person. You can see it on the YouTube at, that's playingfromthetips.com. But Jim is going to be there in person. We're going to be talking about even more golf. We'd love to have you come, be a spectator, or if you can't make it, we'd love you to tune in. But please come on up to Harbor Hills Golf. The 14th of July, and it'll be from 6 to 7. So we'll be all set there. And last question for you, and this is important. Which Sedin, Henrik or Daniel?
I think Henrik's the better player.
Oh, well, okay. I was just curious. I was just curious. I wanted to know what he thought about that. And also, Tampa Bay or Pittsburgh? I'm afraid I know the answer to this.
Pittsburgh played so great. I congratulate them. They had to go through Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay, I play golf with a couple of the coaches, and they are going to be contenders for a lot of years.
And I'm afraid you're right, because they got everything. They got the speed, they got the goaltending, and I like their coach. I think their coach is pretty sharp.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Really
He's an
interesting guy and a good guy. And beyond that, last question. It's an NBA-related question, and what does Vancouver know about the NBA? But no, now that Kevin Durant has gone to Golden State, now they're going to have to win 75 to 80 games next year to make it worthwhile. Is that going to make just the whole NBA season non-existent for about 30 teams? I think it's going to.
It was unbelievable how good they were this year, and Cleveland shut them down.
Cleveland shut them down, but it sure didn't help. They had a chance in the Game 5 at home, and I know they were missing, I can't think of his name, the guy.
Green.
Yeah, thank you. And it didn't help them, but after that they got shut down. There's no question they got played. But they were shook up. You could see they.
I can't imagine how good they're going to be next year.
Well, that's.
They're a fascinating team
but
to
you're going to
watch.
have two teams winning 75 to 80 games next year. I'm just wondering how that's going to be for Memphis and all the other also runs. Well, I'll tell you what, we're out of time. I want to thank Jim Nelford. This has been great. What a thrill. And please come see us up at Harbor Hill on July 14th from 6 to 7. Come live and sit in and watch the show. Well, that's it for tonight. We appreciate you joining us. We'll be back next week with another edition of Shots from the Bench. Thanks so much, folks. Thank you very much. That was a ride.
Welcome.